The thing about taking notes, there's some empirical data. You might learn more. I'm not going to tell you to take notes, but even if you don't keep the notes, this is interesting. If you just write stuff down, the brain tends to sort of remember it better. But you don't have to. So I'm recording this, and it should be working. Hello. Yes. Okay. All right. This is Maya. So a lot of stuff going on, like Thomas said. This is the main menu. We have file, your usual suspects. Why does it go full screen? That's annoying. Edit, create. So all of these, I think until like Windows, these are just here always. And then you see over here, you have a lot of options regarding modeling. So edit mesh, mesh tools, mesh, curves, surfaces. Yeah, they put a lot of stuff in here. But I can also change the entire menu set. So if I change the menu set to rigging, you'll see that the last part of the menus will update. So now these regard rigging. I'm never in here. I'm scared when I see it. I hurry to go out of it. And then there's animation. So these are, see these are for animation. I don't go in there either. Effects, rendering. So you see there's a lot of stuff. Sometimes I do go into rendering. That's sort of part of what I do. But modeling, so this is where we'll be spending time in the modeling tool set. Okay, and so underneath here you have a shelf. So just like anything, everything is available in the menu sets. So I can go here, create polygonal cube, and then I have a cube, or I can click there and to make a cube, a polygon cube. I can go display, UI elements. Where did you go? Oh, here we go, Windows UI elements. So you see we have a status line, that's that one, shelf, time slider, range slider. Time slider, range, these are animation tools, so I don't need those. Help line gives you a little help, toolbox. So you see all these elements. Okay. So when you start out in Maya, anything you do, and I have to mention this every time, I will be mentioning it over and over again. We always set a project. So you need to get into the habit right away. File, project, and then I will set the path for my project. So I can say this will be lecture. Can I type? It's not allowing me to type. There we go, new project, and then I can say lecture. So this is 2017-08-30, and then I can say the path, and I should find, well, I already had that path here, so I can copy it. I just copied it over from the file browser, so it should go there. Now it's gonna make a folder inside of that path. So if I go here and take a look, so you see that's the folder that Maya created. So that's the Maya project folder. Currently, if I click in the Maya project folder, you see all these folders, subfolders. So we have images, movies, scenes, all these things. Currently, I have the Maya project folder made, but I haven't saved a scene. So let's make something. I'll make a cube, and then I need to go save scene as. And then you'll see it automatically goes to the correct path, which is currently on the server, and it goes to the scenes subfolder. And that's where, obviously, the scenes should be stored. So this is important for proper file management. So if you have a scene, there will be textures applied to it, all these different files. And for Maya to be able to read these correctly, it's very important to be working in this structure. So there are two different types of Maya scenes. There's Maya binary, which is nice if you're a machine. It's like binary code. Maya ASCII, which is human readable. So typically we save in Maya ASCII. Then you can actually go into the code and then change things if your scene becomes corrupt or something. So now we can see it up here. I also have a scene. It's a Lecture1, and it's an MA, or Maya ASCII file. So I want you to do that right away. Whenever you start in Maya, just make sure you set a project. And the next time I open Maya, I don't go and create project, but I go set project. So I do this before I click open scene. The next time I'm opening this scene, I go set project. I'll browse to the correct project folder. And that's just selecting the folder and going inside it. Then now I have that selected, I can hit set. And then I click open scene and it will go automatically to the correct scenes folder. And I'm back. All right, so let's just, I think, get started about talking about navigating. So I'm gonna turn off a couple of these UI elements just because I don't have enough space. So range slider, time slider, like don't need those. Those are animation. So here they're gone. How do I navigate? Well, I can hold Alt, and I use the 3 mouse buttons. So you have to have a 3 mouse button, a mouse with 3 buttons in Maya. So left mouse button and holding Alt, I can rotate. Middle mouse button and holding Alt, I can move the camera like this, or dolly in and out. So moving closer or farther away, that's the right key. So this is getting used to this, like moving around, just that. It would take you a little bit of time. You just have to try it. Move around, hold Alt. If I'm over here and I want to quickly just center on the object, I can hit F. I guess it stands for frame or something. And then it will frame the object. Yeah, so that's it about navigating. I'm just going to fly through all these things so you've heard it. So this is currently a perspective view. Obviously, there is perspective. And if I go here, select camera, this is the panel, and I can click view, select camera. It will select this camera and put it in what we call well, this is the channel box. If I hit Control A, now it's in the attribute editor. Okay, so the attribute editor is a very, very important window in Maya. This is where you can have access to all the different attributes about anything. So right now I have the camera selected, and it gives me all this information about the camera. You can see I have a focal length of 35, which is pretty standard, like 35 to 50 millimeter, kind of a standard human vision focal length kind of a thing. Not too wide, not too tele-lens, but in the middle. But sometimes you can go in there and change it. Some people like setting it to 50. If I set it to 100, you see it gets more and more less perspective. So obviously, the more focal length you have, the closer you get to no perspective. In other words, the one axis is just missing altogether. And we actually have those types of cameras as well. Those are called orthographic views. So if I hit spacebar, you can see that we have top camera, front camera, side camera. So you've probably seen like this, this is common for all 3D applications or anything that you're doing. So the thing with the orthographic views is that they're missing one axis. There's only 2 axes. So let's see, if we go to the front view, and you see the front is -z. Oh, that's an important point as well. So if you take a look here in the perspective view, you can see that there's a little indicator down here. The height is the y-axis, and then we have the x-axis, which is the width, and then we have the z-axis, which should always be the front. Okay, so you say, well, it doesn't matter, the front could be anywhere. Well, no, because we're going between different softwares. So if I'm sending this to ZBrush or Mudbox or whatever, Painter, all these other softwares that we use in the pipeline, not in this course, but just you will have to align this correctly. So the z-axis should always be pointing forward. So if I make a copy of this cube, so just Control D, I can make a copy. And then how do I move it around? So let me open up the UI elements again. Toolbox. I hid that, but here's the toolbox. So currently I have just the selection tool that lets me just select things. But I also have other tools down here. So this is the move, rotate, and scale. The main 3 tools. So I can click here. Now I'm in the move tool. Then I can select one axis. So I can click this axis and start moving it in only that axis. or only this axis, or only this axis, or if I click in the middle, I can move it arbitrarily around. Okay. But all these are on the hotkeys WER. So Q, W, ER, those are the first 4 buttons on your keyboard. So Q is the selection tool, W is the move tool, E is the rotate, and R is scale. So I'll have my fingers just placed on Q, W, ER, and this becomes second nature, right? So when I'm working, you will not do this. Don't go in here and click here. If you get into the habit of doing this, it's a lost cause. Please, just try it, Q, W, ER, and then I can move very, very quickly, and I don't have to think about it. If I'm going to rotate, I just rotate. So the hotkeys are pretty important just to get used to right away. So making a copy, Control D. I'm going to move these. So okay, so I've moved these along the C axis. I made 2 copies. What do you think this looks like from the front view? Yes. It looks like one cube, obviously, because the other ones are totally obscuring it. What do you think it will look like in the front cube? Well, let me do this. I'll move these over. I can hold X, by the way, for snapping. This will snap to the grid. Oh, another hotkey combination coming your way. So X, C, V. Those 3 buttons are also right next to each other on the keyboard. So X is snap to grid, C is snap to curve, and V is snap to point. So we'll be using these all the time. So X, C, V. Holding X, I can actually snap to the grid. So I'm snapping to to the grid units. Okay, so what do you think this will look like from the front view, from the front orthographic view? This is what it looks like from the front in the perspective view. What's that? Yeah, plain squares, like that. Just identical, because the depth is missing. Remember, the depth is completely missing. We only have 2 axes to care about. That's the X and Y axis. So that's great for placement. If I were to place these very carefully next to each other, that could be difficult here in the perspective view, but it's very simple to do in the front orthographic view. But it's not great for telling scale and relation and perspective. But they have their uses, and from the top view, I could be moving these around. So that's also what I want you to start kind of experimenting with, just how can I move things around using the various orthographic views. Okay, so I mentioned the attribute editor. So you see when I select the cube, I'll get rid of all these. When I select the cube, and spacebar, I hit spacebar, I can go between all these different modes. When I select the cube, now all of its attributes are visible. So you can see we have, honestly, a lot of things here I never care about, but some things we'll go in here and have a look at. But there's just a lot of information. So we have an abbreviated version of the attribute editor. If I hit Control A, so Control A, I can toggle between attribute editor and something we call the channel box. So this is just some of all of those numbers, but these are very relevant because this is the placement in world space. So if I hit X, it should actually snap precisely to 0 in the grid. So here we have 0 for translation values. That means that it's in the middle of the grid. 0 for the rotational values because it's not rotated. 1 for scale, because if scale were 0, it would disappear. So scale is 1. That's sort of the default scale. And those are the default numbers. So if I were to move this around, up here you can see all these numbers update, and these can be very, very precise. But if I just want it back, I can hit 0, and it will pop back to the 0 in the grid. So this is just geometry. If you remember from geometry class, your standard grid. If I move and in the units, you'll see 1x, 2x, and then also up to y, 1i, y. I'm holding x to snap. But I can also enter numerically. So if I wanted to move this precisely, 5 units up, go like that, and I want to rotate it around the y-axis. So if I rotate it around the y-axis 45 degrees, it's going to do that, like that. And then 0, back. So if I'm making some changes, so if I'm doing this, and I'd like this to be the new default. So you know, I've been modeling, I've been making changes, and now I want to zero out this result. This should be a part of your workflow. I think maybe in the new Maya they added it to the shelf. I'm not sure. Let's make our own shelf in any regard. So we'll go here. This is the shelf, right? I mentioned you can click all these different options, but if you go here, just click there and new shelf, and I can make my own shelf. So jewels, okay, now I have my own shelf. And here I can add all the things that I use a lot. So if I like cube, I can just click Control Shift and click it, and it will add that operation to my own custom shelf. Where do they move the, okay. Oh, they made it easier. Okay, so now you can just right click and delete this, and it will go away from the shelf. Right. So, okay, so how did where was I? Yeah, so to freeze the transformational values, we have something called modify freeze transformations. And I can Control Shift click that and add it. Now I have a little button for it. So this should be this is a very important part of your modeling workflow. You need to be going in there and freezing your transformations. If you forget to do that, chances are your scene will be messed up at some point. So you'll save it and you open it and things will happen and you don't know what happened. So please do that. Okay, so this is also something that I just want you to get started with, like seeing how can you manipulate these primitives. Okay, so the primitives I have here, all these primitives. The primitives are just shapes that Maya gives you initially as a starting point. You also have them here, polygon primitives. So what are polygons? Yeah. I'm sorry? Kind of a cell. Yeah, sort of. It's more like a plane. So if I make a polygonal plane, and I can go in here into the channel box and just turn down the subdivisions. I don't need subdivisions, just one. So that's just a polygonal plane. So technically, it's actually two tries. So a polygon at the very minimum is 3 vertices. Okay, getting ahead of ourselves. We have some points called vertices. So this used to be better, I promise. Anyways, 3 vertices, and there was a line here in between, you can imagine. So at the very least, you have a little plane. That's a polygon. A polygon has a front side and a back side. And I can actually go in here. Oh, two-sided lighting is turned off. So here we can see the back side of the poly is displaying black. So when we're modeling anything we're building, what we want to see is actually the front sides of the polygons. And then that's just it. So I can build all these shapes. If I just click the various polygonal primitives, you'll see here's a cylinder. That's just one that Maya made for you. And here there are some inputs. You could do subdivisions. Whenever you have menu selections here in the channel box, I can click the option and hold middle mouse button, and I can actually use that as a slider to update it like that, or enter it numerically. Typically, it's nice to stick to even numbers. Radius, what'll that do? So you have some of these initial settings in the channel box when you make a primitive. So these, and now they have more primitives here somewhere. Anyways, we'll look at that later. But so all of these are made up of the same way. So we have in Maya, if you right click and hold, and this is what I thought. I really thought this was better in the previous version of Maya, because this menu used to open so that my cursor would be here, which I really need for it to work efficiently. So I hope they change it back, because when I right click, what I want to be, these are gesture-based menus in Maya. So some Maya artists really just use gestures, and you can, there's a lot of hotkey combinations. You can essentially, you don't have to use any of the menu sets. You can just be gesturing with your mouse. But I can right click and hold, and this is a gesture-based menu that I do use, and that's to go between the different components. So currently we've been in object mode, then I can just select the polygonal primitives, and I can move them around. And when you see when I move it around, all the values update, right? Because I'm moving the whole entire polygonal primitive. But I can also move the primitive's components. So let's look at the primitive components. Let me freeze the the transform values here. So this is the new default for this. So if I move it around and I click there 0, it will pop back to that position. Okay, so that's the new starting point. So object mode, I'm moving the whole thing around. Like I said, when I move it, these numbers update. Why? Because I'm moving the whole entire transform node for that object. There's a node that controls the placement of the object in world space. That's what I'm moving around. But there's another way to actually move this object without touching that node. Okay, so I can right click and hold, and I go to the other components. So we have edge. The edges are the lines in between the polys. Oh, and Maya calls the polygons faces. Faces, I can select the polys. And we also have a component called vertex. So vertex, singular, vertices, the plural form. Vertex, and I can click, and these are obviously all the points in between all the edges, around all the polys. And all of these I can move around, obviously, so independently. So I can start moving that vertex around. I can scale these vertices around. So a lot of times you'll be working on the vertices. I can subdivide that. No. So, but you see, when I move the components, these don't update. So I'm not moving the object, I'm just moving the components. So if I grabbed all the vertices and I moved all the verts up, go to object mode again, see, these have not changed because that's the placement of the transform node, which controls the placement of this object. This point, so we call it pivot point, just because when I rotate, that's where things will pivot around. It's a pivot point. Typically, right initially, it's in the mathematical center of all these primitives. There's a quick way to make the pivot point snap back to the mathematical center of this primitive. It's called center pivot. And where did they put it? Here. Control Shift, click center pivot, boom. And then the pivot is back to the mathematical center. There's also a way to change the pivot manually, holding D. So I can hold D, and then I can move. And if I let go of D, I'm back to the standard move tool, and I can rotate from here. So that's useful if I'm making a door. So if I'm here and I'm doing this, and I'm making a door, go up, and I hold D. And while I hold D, I can also do something we talked about earlier, which is snap. So XCV. This time I'm going to hold V, which is snap to point. So I'm holding D, that's to move pivot. And I'm also holding V to snap to point. And then I'm snapping to these points. You all look very excited. I'm sorry, there's a lot of, I mean, I realize there's a lot of things here, but you just have to hear it and then you have to try it. You just, there's no other way. So holding D, I'm sorry if you thought this was an art class. This is more like building, if you're painting and you have to learn how to mix the paint and you have to actually build your own easel or something. It's just it's very technical, but you stick to it eventually. This is a great starting point for you. It's a foundation for everything. If you want, it doesn't matter what field of CG you'll be going into. This is something everyone should know. So holding V, I'm snapping to the point. But you see, if I only hold this axis and hold V, it's only going to move along that axis. So if I'm starting to move and I hold my cursor over these vertices, it's snapping to those vertices, but it's staying aligned to the axis. You see that? I can also snap over here. Now it's finding vertices over here. These primitives. But I can leave it there and rotate and then open the door. So When were we out of here again? 2:15. We have an hour. Oh, shoot. Make a cube. So I want you to get started trying this on the lab. I can move it around. I can scale it. But I don't always just want to be manipulating the entire object. So for instance, if I wanted these vertices down on the ground, does anyone have a suggestion? How can I very simply make those vertices just snap to the ground? Yep. Yep, I'll select the vertices. So I'll right click and hold, select vertices. Oh, there is a hotkey actually, which you might make a note of. F9, F10, F11, and F12. Those will actually change between the component types. So F8 is object mode, F9 is vertex mode, F10 is edge, I forget, you try it. But those are very, very useful. I'm not going to touch it, but it's going to mess up my recording. I think it's assigned to Camtasia. So anyways, but I'm going to select the vertices. I'm going to hit move. And how can I get it exactly on the ground? Yep. Yeah, so I'm just gonna hold X. I'm gonna snap down, and that's gonna snap to the grid, and it's gonna snap it exactly if I leave it there, right there. So you said enter numerically, so we also have the options. I don't know if you could do it in vertex mode. I never do that. I guess you can. Anyways, but you can, like I said, in the channel box, you can enter things numerically. Oh, yeah, there is a way actually. It's hidden. It's here. So that's a good point. Why is it hidden? I don't know. That's Maya. It likes to hide things and you have to know about it. So if I select these vertices, there's a hidden menu here. Oh, you can actually hide menus. You know, if these are in your way, you can hide them. But here, over here, so X, Y, Z, and if I enter 0 for Y, it should snap to 0, Y in the world coordinates. And that's very useful also here in the width. So this is my width, right? I'm looking down here. The x-axis, that's across the width. And then I could do 0x for that to snap in the middle, and then I can delete this. And then now I have half my model. And this is how we're going to be working symmetrically, eventually modeling symmetrical shapes and then mirroring them over. You know, very useful. Okay. So what else can I do? So how can I make an opening for the door? Well, I can't yet by only moving the vertices and everything. I would have to start using some tools. And so obviously there's a lot of modeling tools. Probably the most important tool is the insert edge loop tool. If you ask me, where is it? Where do they put it? They keep changing things around. Probably just to annoy old timers. Insert edge loop tool. Does anyone see it? I see it. So Control Shift click. So, you know, like Thomas said, don't be daunted by all these menus and all these options. You have to get started. So insert edge loop tool, and you don't have to necessarily know all of these. You know, there's not. Also, like Thomas said, there are many ways of doing things, but I don't think you can get away from using insert edge loop tool. Well, there are other tools, but anyways. So I click here. What's going to happen is it's going to follow that edge, and it's going to insert a new edge loop wherever I place it. So right there. Now I have inserted an edge loop. And what happens? Well, if I go to faces, you see now I have 2 polys here. And I have 2 polys here. That means I can keep going. And I'm going to insert an edge loop here. And I don't know exactly where that door is going to close, so let me close it. And then I'm going to insert, oh, and to access the same tool, again, this is also kind of a useful hotkey, is Y. So Y, it will access the recently used tool, which is very useful when you're working. So here I could have also used sort of, you know, the front view. Oh, and also an important thing, which I haven't mentioned, you can click 4 to go to wireframe mode to see the wireframes. That's just not shading the polys. So you're only seeing the polys are invisible. just sometimes useful. So now I can actually place this precisely where the door is if I want it to be painfully mathematically correct. What's a simple way to place this edge loop precisely where the door is? Let's hear from someone else, because you know everything. Yeah? Anyone? Suggestions? How can I get this edge loop precisely here? Yeah. Vertex snapping. How do I do it? V. Exactly. So hold V. I'm going to hover over these vertices. Boom. I'm going to do the same for this one. So I can double click. That will select the edge loop. Have they actually implemented my hotkey? No, they haven't. I thought they did. There's a, okay, I'm going to make a hotkey for this because, and this is something you probably should do. Yeah, you should probably do this. So a hotkey editor, whether you do it now or later. But there's, in the settings and preferences, there's something called the hotkey editor, and you can add your own hotkeys. And this is also a little bit daunting because you can make hotkeys for anything. Oh, they changed it. New layout. This is interesting. Oh. So I'm going to search for, what was I searching for? Oh, select edge loop. Oh, they changed things around on me. So again, probably just to annoy old timers. I don't know why they did it. It seems to be better the way it was, if you ask me. Select edge loop. No. File. Okay, so all right, so they did this. Menu, select. No. Okay, yeah. Here we go. Select. Polygons, modeling, select. Oh. Visualize. Why did they change it? Wasn't it better? I thought it was better. Honestly, this is more confusing. This happens in Maya. Their Autodesk is strange. Yeah, anyways. And I can't search for it. Select edge loop. No, this is very this sucks. What's this? Maya default. Select. Well, it's not crucial, but I will find out later. Anyways, maybe they have another hotkey for it now, but you can double click and it will select the edge loops, but sometimes it's definitely preferable to have a hotkey for it because you don't have to keep double clicking everywhere. Sounds trivial, but it's not. Okay, so then I move this and hold V and it will snap there and I hold V and snap there. So now it's exactly mathematically where it's supposed to be, but there probably should be a gap there, right? I mean, the door wouldn't be just exactly where the frame is. There would be a gap. So when you're modeling, I think what to take away from this is that you should add some imperfections. You should add some volume to things. But here, let me just make this. Oh, we're going to make use of another tool. So now we have a poly there. I can just move this poly. That's going to move everything inside, and I don't want to do that. I need a hole there. Well, I can delete it. Then we look straight into the back faces. Then I can just move the door back in. And now we have it there. Okay, that's fine. But then when I open the door, I'm looking straight into the back faces. We never want to see the back faces. So in your game engine or also in your render, we don't really want to see the back faces. So I guess in the game engines, it will be like invisible. Unless you have like I don't know. Anyways, don't want to see the back faces. So in your final asset, this shouldn't be like this. So what can I do? I'm going to show another tool. So instead of just deleting it, what if we try to extrude? New tool. So this is probably, again, in my opinion, the second most important tool. So insert edge loop tool and extrude. And so now they also changed these menus unnecessarily because the extrude tool will work on all the components, which is strange. So why arrange it into components when the tool works on all the components? Seriously, they made some strange design choices with the new UI. I don't. Okay, all right, so now they actually updated it. So now it says components. So this will work on all the components. Good, okay, that makes more sense. And then Control-Shift-Click. So Control-E, and then push it in. But like I said, this will work on all the components. I never do this, but you can extrude vertices. I will extrude edges all the time, so we'll talk a lot about that, how you can sometimes be working with planes. It's very beneficial for a lot of modeling processes. So, okay, problem. What's happening down there? I don't like it. What's that? Hmm? Inverted? Yeah, but what's happening? Why is it flickering? Inverted? Double phase. Yes. Point for use. The faces are exactly on the same alignment. Why? Because you see, it leaves a face there where there already was one. So I have two, in other words, double, that they're on the same place. That's why we get this flickering, which we never want. And this is actually not a legal mesh. This is not a technically okay solution. You could not leave it like this. It's what we call a non-manifold mesh. It's not like if you think about, just think about it. This is technically impossible, right? Because there should be some volume there. Right now we have two polys. This is something that would never exist in nature. This edge is just, there's no thickness. Yes? Yeah. So display polygons, normals, face normals. Well, I don't think, yeah. So technically, right, so okay. Let's take a break. We'll talk about this after the break. But let me just make a point. So this, what you're saying, the face normals show the direction of the poly, right? So you can see before I did this, we had this polygon, and it's normal. The normal is just like, which way is it pointing? It's pointing down, obviously, like all the other ones are pointing out. And this one is pointing up, which is actually also logical. If I delete this edge, this poly, you'll see, now we see straight into the back there, but when I extrude inward, it's going to leave a face like that. That's all it does. That's all we're talking about. So technically, the tool isn't doing anything it shouldn't be doing. It's just that you can't have polys lying so close together. And this is because this edge actually has no thickness. You never want edges, when you're modeling like this, you never want edges that are just one Maya edge thick. Because one Maya edge has no thickness. It doesn't, there's literally no volume there, like mathematically, no thickness. Right? Makes sense. So rather, if I wanted that gap, I would do this. Or any suggestions? What can I do? If I just wanted a door, an opening there, is there anything I could simply do to make sure I would have some thickness down here? Yep. Oh, this one? Increase the C height. Oh yeah, this one. Make this smaller. No, I can't because that was incorrect. All right, other suggestions? Okay, you can. No, you, new guy. Sorry. Yeah. Edge loop. Where? Bottom. Exactly. So I can insert an edge loop down there, or even like very close to the bottom if I wanted to. And now I will have thickness, and then I can extrude inward. Look at that. Now this is what we call a manifold mesh. Everything is together, nice. If I go in there and take a look, I can go inside. Look at that, nice. And have thickness, everything is fine. I can put that in there. Let's take a break. Let me show you like a mind-blowing trick. How can I quickly make a door? Well, I can copy the mesh, and I can select this face, and I can shift select the rest, and then I can extrude, whoops, this guy. And there's my mathematically precisely measured door, and then I can hold D and hold V, and then I can open it. Oops. Great. Come on. Let me freeze the transformation, center the pivot, try again, hold D, hold V, snap, and rotate. Nice. Very small little room. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're too kind. Okay, So we don't have a lot of time, but let's take a little break. I'll give you 8 minutes, so you will be back here at 1:40.